Some of the most damaging relationships are the hardest ones to explain, and they don't have to look extreme in order to be deeply harmful. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast, where we make sense of what never quite made sense. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more, it's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin moving forward. You need a coach. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone who never cheated, never drank, never raged, someone who on paper looked like the most upstanding person in the room, and yet somehow you always felt like something wasn't right and like you were the problem? You felt judged constantly, quietly, like no matter what you did, it was never quite right, never quite enough. And the worst part, you couldn't fully explain this to anyone else because from the outside, your partner or your parent or your friend looked like a saint. If that resonates with you, stay with me because today we are talking about one of the most misunderstood and most painful types of covert narcissism. And yes, there are different styles or different ways that narcissism shows up. The one we're talking about today is the self-righteous narcissist. Now, I want to start by addressing something that I hear all the time in the CNG community. So many people say, my partner never cheated on me, so I didn't really think they were a narcissist. Don't they have to cheat on you to be a narcissist? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the problem here. And I need you to hear this clearly. Cheating is not a requirement for narcissism. Not even close. There's an entire category, in fact, of narcissists who never cheat and never would, and they will make absolutely sure that you know that. Today's episode is going to give you the language for something you may have felt but never really been able to name. We're going to break down exactly how the self-righteous narcissist operates, why their particular brand of abuse is really hard to see, and most importantly, what it does to you and how you can begin to come back to yourself. By the end of this episode, you will understand how morality gets used as a weapon and a source of narcissistic supply. You've probably heard that phrase before. The specific behaviors and patterns to watch for, why this type of narcissist is so difficult to identify, and why victims so often end up blaming themselves, and what healing actually looks like when you've been on the receiving end of someone else's self-appointed moral authority. Now let's get into it. Before we talk specifically about the self-righteous narcissist, I want to make sure that we're all working from the same foundation. I want to make sure we're all understanding supply. Supply is the key to understanding this entire dynamic. And when most people hear the word narcissistic supply, they think of attention, like admiration, someone who constantly needs to be the center of the room, the center of everybody's attention. They're fishing for compliments. They cannot handle being ignored or that nobody's talking to them. And this is a form of supply. And that is true. But supply, it's actually broader than that. Narcissistic supply is anything that feeds the narcissist core need. And that core need is superiority. It's the need to feel fundamentally better than, more than, above everyone else. And some narcissists get that feeling from being desired. Some get it from being feared. Some get it from being the most successful person in the room. And some, the ones we're talking about today, they get it from being the most righteous person in the room. For the self-righteous narcissist, their moral code It's not actually a value system. And I want you to sit with that for a second. I want that to really sink in. It looks like a value system. It sounds like a value system. They may even sincerely believe that it is a value system. But that's not how it functions. It doesn't function like a value system. It functions like identity armor for them. It is the thing that makes them special, elevated, above reproach, and most importantly, above you. Their goodness isn't about living in alignment with their values. It isn't about being good. It's about having something to hold over your head. And once you understand that, everything else starts to make sense too. Now, let's talk about the mechanics of this. How does the self righteous narcissist actually operate? It usually starts with a standard, a high, visible, loudly held moral standard. Now, maybe it's religious, maybe it's financial. They pride themselves on being very responsible with their money and never being frivolous. Maybe it's dietary and their standards are really high on their clean eating. Or maybe it's health related and working out and fitness related. Maybe it's their work ethic. Maybe it's about their loyalty and that I would never cheat and I'm so faithful and loyal to you. And honestly, it's any number of genuinely good values. And this is part of what makes it so incredibly disorienting because the standard itself is not a bad thing. The standard, the value, is not wrong. Honesty is a good value. Financial responsibility is a good thing. Being faithful in a relationship is definitely something to honor. So, in the beginning, you may have even admired this about them. You may have been drawn to it. This person has integrity. This person stands for something. And again, that's not a bad thing. But over time, you begin to notice something. The standard isn't just something that they live by, it becomes the lens through which they evaluate you. And you are always being evaluated. Every little thing, the way you spend money, the way you talk to people, the way you handled a situation at work 10 years ago that they still bring up, the way that, that moment you raised your voice, the time that you told that little white lie, the night that you had maybe one too many glasses of wine, the days you didn't go to the gym, every single imperfection cataloged, remembered, and available for use at any time. This is kind of what I call like a moral scoreboard. And here's the thing about the moral scoreboard. You are never, ever winning because the narcissist controls the scoreboard. They decide what counts, what gets recorded, what gets brought back up, and their side of the scoreboard? No, that's largely immune to scrutiny. You're not allowed to ever give feedback about their scoreboard. Now, let's dive in a little bit deeper. They don't cheat, and you will hear about it. They work hard, and you will hear about it in a scoreboard kind of way. They sacrificed for the family, and you will hear about it. Meanwhile, your contributions, your integrity, your sacrifices, your growth, your efforts get minimized, overlooked, or reframed as not quite enough. And the phrases, oh, the phrases. They sound so reasonable on the surface. But if you've lived with this, you know exactly the feeling that they produce. They say things like, I just have high standards. I can't help it if not everyone else does. This can be said so casually, almost like they're saying it to themselves, but loud enough for you to hear, loud enough for you to wonder, well, which category do I fall into? They might say, I would never do something like that. Not said in anger, not said, aggressively, but said maybe with even a kind of quiet, sorrowful disbelief, as if your behavior is something that they have to process, as if your very humanness is a burden that they are graciously bearing. They might say, I'm not judging you. I just know what I would do in that situation. Well, this disclaimer before the judgment that makes the judgment somehow all of a sudden harder to argue with? They might say to you, I've never lied to you, not once, and I think that says something. Well, it does say something, but the way it's being said, maybe in the middle of a conflict like a trump card, tells you everything about why it's being brought up. They might say, I just think integrity matters, but, maybe that's old fashioned. Framed as humility, but functioning as superiority. And when you try to point out something that they've done wrong, by the way, watch how quickly the scoreboard gets flipped. I can't believe after everything I've done for you that this is what we're talking about. Suddenly, your legitimate concern becomes an act of ingratitude. Suddenly, you're the one who needs to apologize. It's a system designed for one outcome. They stay elevated and you stay diminished. The problem is not the values that are being held. The problem is the way those values are used against you. They don't have to raise their voice to do it. They don't have to throw things or call you names. A look, a sigh, a quiet, I just expected more from you, a disappointed pause. That's all it takes. Because by the time this pattern is fully established, you end up internalizing their moral authority so completely that their disapproval alone, it's devastating. Now, one of the most powerful things that this podcast can do is help you to connect what you already intellectually understand to what you actually lived. So let me paint some pictures here. Maybe you grew up with a parent like this, the self-righteous narcissist, a parent who never missed church, who volunteered in the community, who everyone in the neighborhood thought was wonderful. But at home, this parent made you feel like you could never live up to their standards. Maybe they didn't hit you. No, they might not have even screamed at you. But there was this constant low hum of disappointment. A look that said, you are a reflection of me and you are embarrassing. And maybe not even just a look, maybe those words were voiced. Maybe they said things to you like, what will people think? Not, hey, are you okay? Or what were you feeling when that happened? No, they say, what will people think? Because your behavior was always first and foremost a threat to their image. They might say things like, I don't know where you get that from. That's certainly not how I raised you. Distancing themselves from your failure. Instead of checking in on you and how you are doing, they are making sure that it's clear that whatever you did wrong, it didn't come from them. Maybe they say to you, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. And this can be okay and it can be communicated in a healthy way between a parent and a child. But if it's said in that tone that makes the disappointment feel worse than anger ever could, and then this silence after, a silence that after you've made that mistake that somehow hurts worse than any punishment. The goal here from a healthy parent is connection. But that silence, it does not leave you feeling connected. That silence says you are not worth the energy that it would take to address this. You have failed me, and it's a withdrawal. Now, let's talk about how this looks in a partner, someone who was proud of their faithfulness and made sure that you knew it, especially during arguments. Now, the timing of when things get brought up really matters here. They might say, I have given you everything. I've never looked at another person. I've never betrayed you in any way. And this is how you treat me? And maybe all you did was smile and be friendly to a waiter at a restaurant. Maybe all you did was stop while outside doing yard work and chat with a neighbor. Not because you betrayed them, but because their faithfulness was a debt that they expected you to keep paying on indefinitely. Picture someone who gives so generously to others, to charities, to friends, to causes, but at home is emotionally withholding. They could spend an entire weekend volunteering and come home with nothing to give to you. But if you dare to mention it, you don't get, hey, I'm really sorry. I spent a lot of my energy this weekend. How about we set aside some time next weekend? You don't get that. No, you get, I'm sorry, I care about other people. I didn't realize that was a problem. This is where their generosity is being weaponized against you. How about someone who handles the finances responsibly and will never let you forget it? They look at your spending, not with rage, but with this slow, measured exhale, somehow feels worse than rage. I'm not saying you can't spend money. I just think about our future, but that's just me, leaving you feeling guilty for spending, $10 for a lunch, something simple, something not extravagant, but yet it gets held against you. How about in social settings where you're with somebody who is warm and generous and funny, but on the drive home, cold, distant, judgmental? They can perform connection beautifully for an audience and then sit right next to you in silence for 45 minutes on the way home. Not a comfortable silence where everybody's just kind of taking some pause and letting their ears rest and their system rest. No, a cold, chilling silence. And when you ask them what's wrong, nothing. I'm fine. I just noticed how you talked to so and so tonight. I'm fine. Well, clearly they are not fine. But now you're spending the rest of the night trying to figure out what you did, replaying the evening in your head, editing your behavior retroactively, apologizing for something that was never clearly named. But that's the game. And you don't even know you're playing it until you finally get your eyes open and see it. The self-righteous narcissist often has an audience in mind, even when they're alone with you. Their generosity happens when people can see it. Their sacrifice gets mentioned in conversation. Their restraint, their discipline, their faithfulness, these things have a way of coming up. Not always loudly, sometimes quite subtly, but they come up because the supply only works if someone else knows about it. Now, I want to talk about why this is so particularly disorienting and why so many survivors of this dynamic spend years doubting their own experience. First, there is no obvious smoking gun. With other types of narcissistic abuse, there's often something very visible. Rage, infidelity, financial destruction, addiction. Those things are hard to deny even when you're in the fog of the relationship. But the self-righteous narcissist gives you nothing that obvious. What they give you is feelings. Feelings of inadequacy, feelings of shame, feelings of never being good enough, feelings, especially in the context of a relationship with someone who looks so good on the outside. Feelings are very easy to dismiss. They're very easy to think, well, it's my own problem. Second, and this is so important, they often have genuine social proof of their greatness. Everyone else thinks they're wonderful. Your friends, your family, the community around you, the people at church, at work, or in the neighborhood. So when you try to articulate what's wrong, you run into a wall. But they're such a good person. You try to tell a friend, and your friend says, "Are you sure that you're not being too sensitive? I just don't see them that way." And something in you deflates because you've asked yourself that same question 1,000 times already. You try to tell a family member and they say, well, they work so hard for your family. They've never cheated on you. A lot of people would be grateful for that. And now you feel guilty for even bringing it up. And so you stop. You stop bringing it up. You start to truly believe that the problem is you or your perception, that you're asking for too much, that a person who is so visibly good, this publicly moral and universally respected person, surely cannot be the source of your pain. So the source must be you. And then starts the internal dialogue, the conversation that you have with yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do have a spending problem. Maybe I did embarrass them at that party. Maybe I'm not as honest as I should be. Maybe I'm the difficult one. Maybe I don't explain myself well. Maybe I'm the one who needs to change. And that spiral continues because the self-righteous narcissist has done something very sophisticated here. They haven't just criticized you. They've given you the tools to criticize yourself. They've installed a voice in your head that sounds like them, and that voice runs on autopilot long after they've left the room. It's not just self-reflection here that we're talking about. It's the result of sustained, covert psychological pressure. And it's one of the most disorienting things to untangle because it feels like your own thoughts. It feels like your own conscience, but it isn't. It's theirs. I also want to point out here that many victims have actually adopted the narcissist value system. If you spent years living under someone else's moral framework, you start to absorb it yourself too. You may genuinely believe that the standard that they held was the right one for you too, and that your failure to meet it says something very real about you. And this is one of the most insidious long term effects of this type of abuse. It doesn't just hurt you in the relationship, it follows you out of the relationship too. Add to all of this confusion the fact that the self righteous narcissist is almost never obvious about what they're doing. There is always this plausible deniability, this back door where they can excuse what they're saying, or they can justify it, or explain it, or even paint it in a good picture. They say things like, I'm just holding you accountable, or I have high standards. Is that a crime? Or I just want both of us to be our best. And these phrases sound good. They sound reasonable. They even sound loving. But that gap between how it sounds and how it feels, that's where your self doubt lives. That's where the confusion lives. And that's where you start then judging yourself and doubting yourself. Let's talk about what living inside this dynamic actually does to a person, because I think it's important to name the damage clearly. Not to keep you stuck in it, but because healing begins with seeing what's actually happening. You have to be able to see it before you can heal from it. Chronic shame is the signature wound of a relationship with a self-righteous narcissist. Not situational shame, not the kind that says, I did something that I regret and maybe I need to go fix this. No, that's situational shame and it has a purpose. But this is a deep, pervasive shame. It's a deep sense that you are fundamentally flawed, that there is something wrong with you at your very core, that other people are better than you, more moral, more put together than you are. That shame gets woven deep into your identity, and it doesn't just disappear when the relationship ends. It begins this hypervigilant self-monitoring. And I want to make this concrete because I think there's a lot of people experiencing this without having a name for it. It's the pause before you buy something, even something small, something you can easily afford, but that pause where you hear their voice, you might think it's your own, but you hear their voice. Is this frivolous? What would they say about this? That voice is this self-monitoring that I'm talking about. It's the way you edit yourself before you speak in a group setting, running your words through a filter, checking them for anything that might, later be used as evidence to support the idea that you're not good enough. It's the way you over-explain yourself to everyone, your boss, your friends, the cashier. Who cares what the cashier thinks of you? But you find yourself over-explaining things to them because somewhere along the way, you learned that your choices require justification, that simply wanting something isn't reason enough. You owe an account of yourself at all times to all people. This is how the relationship with the self-righteous narcissist starts to influence the rest of our life, the other relationships we have, and the people around us. It's the way you apologize constantly, reflexively, for things that don't require an apology. You apologize for taking up space, for having needs, for being human. And it's the way you brace, even now, if you're outside of the relationship, when something goes wrong. That full body brace for the judgment that may no longer be coming from them, but that you have learned to deliver to yourself. This is the long shadow of the self-righteous narcissist. It doesn't end when the relationship ends because it lives on in your nervous system, in your habits, and in the way you move through your world. Naming it, really seeing it clearly, is the first step towards dismantling it. When someone else's moral authority has become the dominant voice in your life and been there for long enough, you stop trusting your own instincts about right and wrong, about what you should do or shouldn't do. Your gut gets confused and you start second guessing everything because they've contaminated your internal voice, your internal moral compass. Your values have been influenced by someone who used values as a weapon. This is profound damage. None of it was your fault. You did not create this. You responded as any human being would to a sustained covert campaign to make you feel less than. So, where does healing begin? It begins with a question, one simple question that the self righteous narcissist never wanted you to ask. Because the moment you start asking it, their power over you begins to dissolve. That question is, who am I when no one is grading me? Not who do I need to be to avoid the look? Not who do I need to be to avoid the silence or the sighing? Not who do I need to be to finally measure up? Just who am I when no one is grading me? What do I actually believe? What do I actually value? Not because someone handed it to me as a standard, not because I was shamed into it, but because it genuinely lives in me. That's the work. And I want to give you something very concrete to take with you. So I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. When you notice that voice in your head, that borrowed voice that sounds like judgment or disappointment, and it's uncomfortable to you, I want you to pause and I want you to ask yourself these 3 questions. Is this thought mine? Does this standard make me a better person? And if no one were watching, would I still care about this? These 3 questions are a compass. Is this thought mine, or was it handed to me? Does this standard make me a better person, or does it just make me feel small? And if no one were watching, if there's no grade, no scorecard, no audience, would I still care about this? These questions can help you to sort through what's genuinely yours and separate that from what was installed inside of you without your permission. Over time, not overnight, but over time, you start to hear your own voice again. Quiet at first, maybe a little uncertain, but it's yours. And here's what I want you to remember from today's episode. Write it down if you need to. Genuine morality is quiet. It doesn't perform. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't need an audience. And it never needs to make you feel small in order to prove yourself. If the moral standards in your relationship were loud, okay, they were used to grade you, to shame you, to remind you of your debt, or to keep you in a lower position, a one-down position, that was never morality. It was control wearing morality's clothing. You're allowed to take off the costume that someone else dressed you in and ask for maybe the first time, what does my own goodness actually look like? That's where the self comes back online. That's the self that's been waiting for you. Now, if you've been measuring yourself against someone else's moral scoreboard and always coming up short, I want you to hear this one more time. That scoreboard was never fair. It was never designed to be. And the fact that you could not win on it says nothing about your worth or your character or your goodness. You were navigating a system that was built to keep you beneath someone who needed to feel above. And the very fact that you're here, seeking understanding, doing this work, trying to make sense of something that was deliberately designed to confuse you, that tells me something about who you are. Now, before you go, if anything in today's episode resonated with you, I want to make sure you have somewhere to go with it. I've put together a free guide called Am I Being Abused? The Covert Narcissism Reality Check. It walks you through 10 signs of covert narcissistic abuse, the ones that most people miss. And it was written specifically for people who feel like something is deeply wrong but can't quite explain why. If that's you, this guide will give you the language and the validation that you deserve. You can grab it for free on my website at covertnarcissism.com. That's a very easy name to remember. There's also a link in the show notes. And if this episode resonates with you, I would love for you to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a review if you've not done so. I do ask, please leave a review. It genuinely helps this show to reach more people, those people out there who need it most. And if you're ready to go deeper than podcast and do this healing work with real support, my coaching program is open and available to you, also at the website covertnarcissism.com. Until next time, I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. If you've been listening for a while, you may already understand what's happening in your relationship. You can see the patterns, you can name the behaviors, but maybe you still feel stuck in the same cycle. This is where coaching comes in. It's not about learning more. It's about having the support to finally apply what you already know and begin to move forward. If you're ready for that next step, I invite you to join me in my coaching program. You can learn more about it at covertnarcissism.com. Your story matters, and you deserve to be heard without judgment. Check out my coaching services at my website, again, covertnarcissism.com. And don't forget to subscribe, to thumbs up, to follow, to like this podcast so that you can get more empowering episodes like this one and to help us continue spreading the word so that our community can continue to grow. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those she has talked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support any allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of this material and information provided.